Hey, it's Warren Hewitt here. Hope you're doing marvelously well. So in this latest episode of Pro Mix Academy, we're going to mix a song by the Polish rock band Snakebite, and the song is called My Final Hour. Now, I tracked the drums for this at Hybrid Studios, and I've done a few walkthroughs on the Produce Like a Pro channel. So if you haven't already, go and check those out. You'll see how we recorded the drums there. It's kind of fun. Now, this one's an interesting one for me. I've already filmed the Auric one, and so I went over there and hung with Auric as he was doing the full breakdown. I'm going to recall the original mix that he had as a reference, so I'm not going to change my mix, but I will say something. His and my approaches are the same and completely different all at the same time. What was wonderful about what Auric did, and I don't know which order you're watching this in, so you've either watched it or you're about to watch it, but what was wonderful is he treated it exactly the way I wanted him to. That means he took the song that I did and thought, how can I A, improve it, and B, turn it into a single? So he did an edit on it, which was fantastic, that I didn't do, and he really made it more concise. And he definitely made it sound like a massive modern rock song. I mean, it sounds huge and modern rock. Now, mine sounds big and expansive, and I'm very happy with my mix, but mine comes from a place of being a classic rock guy. Now, I do modern rock. Those of you that have followed me or know anything about my resume know that I mixed Black Veil Bride's live album. I actually recorded it and mixed it live, and that was mixed through the same console in a very similar way to what we're talking about here. So there's a lot of those same kind of ideas moving from the live world to the studio world. I use the same kind of drum samples. I use the same techniques that I'm going to show you here. But I do believe that my sensibilities are classic stroke modern rock, where Auric has always worked with the really super loud, crunchy bands. I mean, he worked with earlier versions of Anthrax and Pantera, like bands that have always been on the cusp of just being loud, aggressive rock bands. And even the bands he works with now have that same aggression. So I really love what he did. But what I did, I also love, and I think it will speak to those of you that come from a more classic rock place. So this is a really good song for me. I think of all the songs that we've done in Pro Mix Academy, what I love about this one and this approach is the ability, is being able to show off the ability of how you can lean one way or another with the same files. With the same recording, you can get different but same approaches, like more modern and crunchy, loud, percussive, aggressive, like Auric does. Some of that loud, percussive, aggressive that I've done, but with the sensibility of like, oh, you like Zeppelin? You like Aerosmith? There's a bit of that mixed in. So it's a really interesting one. I'm very excited. When I got to sit down and watch Auric did it, it made me very excited to do this. So we're going to go through this. This again is mixed in a hybrid fashion. So it's going to be the console behind me, the SSL, blended with in-the-box stuff, where Auric's is completely and utterly done in Logic. So Pro Tools and Logic. Really awesome combination between the two. So enjoy it. Let's start. Okay, so going from the top down, we'll start off with the drums. There's a click track up here. Now, you'll notice, those of you that Produce Like a Pro members, and if you're not already, you can join the website and download the samples for free. You'll notice I'm using a combination of a lot of the samples I always use. Now, to me, I do a sample package and I use various samples and I use the addictive drums and stuff, and I blend them in different ways. So here I blended and EQ'd a little bit more aggressively than I would normally. So if we just solo the drums for a second, let's have a listen. Okay, so I like it. Aggressive snare, aggressive kick. Now, what I did is I used a lot of the real kick. If we listen to just the kick in, the kick out. The kick in is a D112, the kick out is a U87, and there's an Audix which is pulled back out. And these three elements together give us this. As you can see, the kick in is one of the more balanced ones with the kick out. The one that's on pulled out a bit is a little uneven, but there's a combination between all three. Now, what have we got going on? On the kick in alone, we have just a time adjuster. And what the time adjuster is doing is pulling the kick in and the kick out and making it go in time with the kick back here. There's no EQ going on the kick in, but there is going down the channel. So on the SSL. So there's a kick master here, which is 1. That has a little bit of compression using the 2500. So we can see what it's doing here. So we're getting a maximum of about 2, a little bit over 3 dB at times of compression. Take it off. It's keeping it more even. It's definitely losing a little bit of the dynamics in a good way. I mean, he's a great drummer. Conrad, who's the drummer in the band, is a great drummer. Obviously, you can see how good the performance is there. But at the same time, you know, it's double kicks. You're always going to get that. You're going to get that oji, 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 as opposed to. See that effect of just one, as opposed to. I think I'm hitting it the same, but I'll never get it the same with 2 different feet. So he's doing that double foot. So the compressor is just evening it out just a little bit, at least enough to make it feel a bit more even. Take it off. You know, it's not working miracles, it's just doing enough to even it out. So the kick in, no EQ on it, just a time adjuster, knocking it back in phase with this mic down here, which you can see is behind. So we're just taking the transients here and just bringing it back. So you can measure, I usually double measure, so I'm measuring there and I'm measuring there and finding the average place of the waveform. So you're marrying the waveforms up. Where one goes down, you want that to pull back so it's just over it. Now some people use aligning software. You can do that. I only align my kicks together and my snare and my toms with my overheads. I let everything else be. I let the overheads, I let the room mics be where they are. The overheads are my constant because they're a representation of my kit. The kick, I always make sure that all 3 elements or however mics I'm using are all in phase with each other, all have good polarity, so it has good bottom end. But you'll find that I don't do anything with the room mics. I see people use different aligning software to get all their drums perfectly slamming. The only thing I will say with that is the drums will end up sounding smaller. When you're in a room, you're hearing sounds bouncing off at different times. You're not hearing everything coming towards you at the same time. If you heard every drum and every cymbal and every room reflection hitting you at the same time, it would literally sound like tick, 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 tick. You wouldn't get that huge sound. Now, obviously, when you're boosting top end and you've got very, very attacky transients on kick drums and snare drums, you need all of the direct sources, all of the snares, the snare mics that you're using, and all the kick mics to be in phase and the polarity to be good together, or you'll get a horrible flamming between the mics because you're going to get all 3 of these different kick transients all going slightly later, and you'll get like, you won't get tick, 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 you'll get flicker, 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 flicker. And it's horrific. So I personally use time adjuster. You could use an aligning software. However, if you are going to do that, playlist your tracks. Make sure you can always go back to the originals, whatever you do. Some people just simply move the track back until it all lines up visually. All of these things work. I don't do it. I put the time adjuster on the track and I make it so that they push back. But I like personally to leave the tracks where they are, so I know that if I want to just quickly see what it's with or would like it, it's just a simple plug in on and off. If I am going to move tracks, or I am going to use an auto aligning software for my drums, not that I do, but if I did want to, I would always playlist. So there's an original recorded in position one that I can always go back to. That's just superstition and honestly the best way to work. Cool, so we got the kick, some to 1 here. The EQ is pretty crazy, pretty aggressive. Got a lot of 60 boost here. Looks like about at least 7 dBs worth of 60 boost. I've also cutting about 6 dB, around about 500. I'm boosting at about 2 at 6 dB, and I'm boosting about 9 dB. And I'm also high passing at about maybe 10 or 20, just getting rid of super low lows. Channel out is inserted. So what that means is the compression's going into the EQ. So any boosts and stuff I'm doing are slamming to EQ, and that gives us that familiar SSL slap. Because the thing about SSL compressors is there's a gain makeup that comes immediately. So any compression that's done, that's the compression before. There's a compression afterwards. It's just more controlled. Take the EQ out. Kind of floppy. Put it back in. It's a little bit more rock. So the compression on the kick is, it's set to do about 3 dB. 3, just occasionally that light's coming in, so 3 or 4 dB worth of compression. The ratio is at 3 to 1. It's not a super fast release, but it's on the faster side. So it's a decent amount of compression. Next thing is I'm inserting here. Take the insert out, put it in. You hear there's even more aggression. We're really going crazy on it. So what we're doing here is we're boosting 63 on this API 560. We're cutting at 250 and 125, so doing some low mid and low cut there. Boosting at 8K, boosting slightly at 4. So I'm doing even more shaping, more of the same. I just like the sound of this EQ. Out. It's just a bit more controlled. I think it's pulling out some unwanted frequencies in these low mids there. There's probably something, frankly, about the 2520 op amps in there that just kind of suck up some of those transients. Okay, great. On the kick on the Transient Designer, if anything, it's giving me a little bit more aggression on the attack. I could shorten the sustain, but it's about where I want it to be. I already did quite a lot of work on that in Pro Tools, but I love the Transient Designer. Okay, so next up is a kick out. Again, no EQ on this. It's just going straight into the console. The only thing is, with the kick out, is I like the way it sounded, so I'm putting a little bit of, see, bus 15 and 16 is going into a kick room here. So it's giving us a little bit of ambience. So kick in and kick out together. There is some EQ and compression, minor compression going on 25 and 26. 25 and 26 is as a place where I often put like additional drum mics that I can combine together. So I might put the kick, I might put one of the snare mics in there, and then I might compress or EQ them together. And sometimes I don't, but it's a selection that I like to do. I'll have individual channels, and then sometimes I'll just bust things into a stereo pair that I can treat as a stereo pair. Okay, so the kick room is basically, again, you'll hear me talk about this a lot, it's 3/4 of a second. Why do I like 3/4 of a second? I talk about this a lot. I used to have a room that had about that size of ambience, so I like it, and especially on kicks, very fast transient kicks. You don't want, you don't want it to be super long, because it will just end up as a big wash of reverb. Often you'll find I'll do heavy, aggressive EQ on kick reverbs and wipe off all the bottom end, because sometimes there's too much low rumble going on and it just makes the whole bottom end turn into a big mess. Okay, next up is our kick Audix, which is also going to 25-26. This does have EQ on it. Taking off some of the high top. Not very loud. The kick out is picking up the head on the kick. Audix is just pulled back without the Audix. With. So this is our 25-26, and we were just sending them to here. I don't put it into the kick channel because it will just overload it. I give it its own dedicated channel. I'm boosting at about 60. I'm cutting lightly at about 400. I'm boosting at about 2.5, and I'm boosting at about 5K. I take the EQ out, little woolly, back in. Not a lot of compression going on, and again, they're stereo linked. So that's just a natural kick with a little bit of EQ and hardly any compression. Kick in. Kick in is really dominating on the live. So for all of the live elements in the mix, it's being dominated by the kick in. And the kick in has natural isolation, it's inside. I also did a reasonable amount of EQ and compression going in, so I printed it this way. So the kick in sounds somewhat like that. Okay, now as far as kick samples, I've got my bootstrap kick here. Which is definitely similar to my live kick in. Now, why is it similar? It's because it's one I recorded. And the reason why it's called Bootstraps is I was working with the band Bootstraps, and it's one of the samples I created when recording them. Okay, so I've got the time adjuster to knock it back in time with the live kick out. Sorry, with the live kick back mic. I've got EQ going on where I'm boosting some 5K, cutting some low mids out 400 and boosting a bit of 50. So if I take that off, you'll hear this. Put it on. It's just exaggerating the low lows, getting rid of some of the low mids and boosting some of the attack on the kick. Next up, and most importantly, is a transient designer. See, that's almost like you almost hit just like a hum of lows with it off. Put it on. So the transient designer of increasing the attack and reducing the sustain. So it's that same thing where I was talking about having a lot of bottom end build up. The way I've got it is like I'm reducing the sustain, so it's more like dot 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 as opposed to do 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 do. Because on super fast kicks, what's going to end up happening is going to be this lot of low build up. So this is really cutting it back. So after that, like I say, increased attack, reduced sustain. After that, I have a top end lift, which is really aggressive. Without it, with it, it's giving it a lot more point. So that's blending nicely with my live kick. Next up is a metal kick. Well, you can imagine what this sounds like. That really is aggressive. Time adjuster again, knocking it back. Not doing a huge amount of EQ because originally on the API because it's already got that. I bought these APIs off Waves a couple of years ago when they did a deal on it. It's one of the best investments I've made. I use them a lot. I really do. In some ways, I get a lot more use out of them than I do some of the hardware ones. I do use the hardware on the kick and the snare as you'll see, but with and without. You can hear it come and go. Even if it's only one click cut and one click boost, it's making quite a dramatic difference. Again, transient designer, not reducing the sustain, but increasing the attack. So off, on, off, on. So you can hear the attack being increased by the transient designer. Next up, even more aggression on the kick. Now, what's important to know, and you'll notice this, and I talk about this a lot, things are not done, like when I pulled up the drum sound, obviously I can create a template off this song and then keep mixing the rest of the album. So on song 2, I'll have this drum sound acquired, and then I can bring that to the second song. But what's really important to know about this is that the reason why there's 2 EQs, the reason why there's this transient designer is because of the way I'm mixing. I might start with a very natural drum sound. I add an aggressive bass, and I go, I need a bit more kick, need a bit more click on the kick. So I'll add a little bit more attack on it. And then I add some heavy guitars, and I'm like, it's still not cutting. So then I add like a boost. So there's a sort of natural progression. Now, that's why sometimes you end up with multiple EQs and transient designers and multiple compression at times, because you keep pushing things, adding instruments, getting it bigger, and you're blending. So don't be afraid. You don't have to go back to your original EQ and overboost it. If you've got DSP power, you can add one later in the chain and just add a little bit. And you can see it's a different color from the waves. I personally find the waves, I've used them for years, a little bit more neutral. I like Mac DSP because they color it, but in a good way. But I find the waves a little bit more neutral. So if I like what I've got, but I just want to brighten it a little bit, I often will open the Renaissance EQ. Now, everybody's going to have an opinion about that, but that's just my humble opinion, that if I want to get a bit more aggressive, go for the Renaissance, add it at the end, brighten it up. And that's what happened with this mix. Okay, so those are all the kicks. Next up is some snare. Now, there's a couple of things to notice. Well, first of all, let's start off with our snare top and snare bottom. Now, what I did at Hybrid, and I have done this, I did Robert John and the Rex recent album there, and those of you who follow me on and Produce Like a Pro, or more importantly, are in the Academy, you'll know that what I did when I did the Robert John and the Rex song from there is, like, after we finished a performance, I had the drummer hit the snare. I did the same thing here with Conrad. So he played the snare several times, played the kick several times, went round the toms, and that gave me a kick sample and a snare sample off of the floor with all of, if I wanted it, I had the ambience if I needed it. But it's a good trick, and it really, really helped us. So there's the live snare. And this is the live snare top. It's a little uneven, I'll be honest. It's not the best performance ever. He's a rock drummer. They tend to dig in pretty hard. But it's, you know, like I said, it's tight. He's playing it very tight, and that's the most important thing. Okay, so it's 147 samples. That's pushing it back in phase with the overhead. So I'm measuring the amount of samples, and it needs to go back to be in phase with the overheads. The overhead mics are pointing down at 46.5 inches to the snare, equally 46.5 inches. So whenever I pull the snare back in, backwards in a few samples, it's going to be in phase with my overheads. I will show you how I measured that one more time. And it's the same principle I do with the kick. So if I bring the overheads up here, I'll make these larger. So you see the phase is the same, goes down and it goes up. So if I bring this back around about here, it's about near as done. It says 156. You know, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. I can also go here and look at it here. Oops, here. And it's averaging out to 149. So 147 was probably an average of the song in different places. Either way, it's only like 2 or 3 samples off, 5, 10 samples off maximum at any time. So that's why there's a time adjuster on it. Okay, so next up, let's pull the overheads back down so they're not in the way. Okay, so next up is an EQ, and I'm pulling out some of that excessive ring. So let's have a listen. Listen to it. There's a ring, but listen to it without EQing. EQ in, EQ out. It's almost like a bell is ringing so much. It's interesting, that's a supraphonic, I believe. So it's like a classic rock kind of snare. You know, there's just so much you can do to it to make it bigger. So next up, EQ-wise, is a top-end boost of 3 dB. There's also reverb going to it here. And that's coming out 35, 36. The snare's going to channel 2 on the console. Okay, so on the reverb, we have EQ first, and again, pulling out more of that ring, boosting some of the top end. Then it's hitting the true verb, which has got, again, a 0.7 decay time. And then our good friend MV2. There's dry. With the verb. Now, it's only triggering from the snare top. There's a couple of things you're going to notice why. Here is our snare bottom, which we'll just play on its own. Again, using time adjusters and not getting phase. Little top end boost here to hear that bottom snare together. You can, if you wish, you can put a compressor on the snare bottom and try and get rid of some of that kick. There's so much fast kick on this. Trying to get the kick completely out of the snare bottom with enough fastest attack and release time was too much. But the kick bleed in the snare bottom is not that bad. Let's have a listen. Barely there. And one of the beauties of running snare top and snare bottom mics, and one of the reasons why I like it, is when you flip the phase, which you have to, the polarity on the bottom mic to make the snare in, you also cancel out a little bit of kick bleed that might have been got in there because you hear, because the other side of the mic is hearing the kick as well. So there's a little bit of cancellation that goes on there, which is really nice. Gets rid of some of the kick out there. Okay, so let's move up here to the live snare. So these are snares. This is the snare that was recorded live after the performance. So if I play the snare top and snare bottom together, you'll hear a really consistent snare. It's great. Nice and consistent. Same tone, same, recorded afterwards. We finished recording the track, go, oh, we like that, and he hits the snare and we get nice clean hits on it. So time adjuster again, EQ, little tiny boost. Here again, that's on the snare bottom. On the snare top, we've pulled out that same mid-range ring and the same top end boost. Treated exactly the same way as the live snare is treated, the samples. And they are all coming out of snare 2 on the console. So here we have it. Without the sample. Remember, this is not a sample of a different sound. This is a sample of the actual live snare. Keeps body and stuff going on there. Sounds great. Okay, so now we have a consistent, fat-sounding natural live snare where we've reduced some of the ring. There's a tiny bit of room in there, not overly excessive. Here's the EQ out. It's kind of woolly and boring. Boosting at about 120, 6 dB. There's some lows. Boosting again, maybe about 275, just slightly, a bit more body. Tiny bit. Very narrow Q. The Q is pretty narrow. And I'm boosting heavily, about 6 dB or so at 5K. And then at about 6K, boosting 6 dB. And then I'm high passing about 90 to 100. So I'm boosting and cutting at the same kind of area. So I'm creating a pretty tough shelf at about 100-ish. Because I'm cutting there and boosting there at the same time. I'm compressing before I hit the EQ though. Here's the compression out. in. That's if the EQ was going into the compressor. See how insane that is? Far too compressed. So snare compression is 5 to 1, so it's quite a lot of compression, you know? Here it is without. Here it is with. The thing about SSL dynamic sections is they automatically rebalance the gain. So you don't have to do that manually, which is a really nice thing. So volume-wise, it's pretty similar. If anything, it just sounds fuller once you put it in. They're they're great sounding sections. The other thing is the insert allows us to get to this other API 560, which is boosting 8K, 2K, 250, and 125, and rolling off at 31. So getting rid of some low lows, boosting some low mids, a bit of 250, a bit of 125, boosting some 2K, and boosting some 8K. And that's just giving us a little bit more aggression. If I take it out, put it back in. Out, in. Now the snare, Transient Designer, it's not doing as much as it does in some instances. It's actually really nice. This can be a lifesaver. It really can. You can bring the attack back. If you get a little too carried away with compression and EQ, sometimes it gets really soft. That can really bring it back. It's good. It's adding some weight. A little spank. You know, it's one of the few pieces of hardware that I do still really love. This is how we get it even more aggressive. While I was recording, I printed this live snare through an SPX 90. So here it is. Very nice. So all of that mid-range pulled out again. Some really over the top end boost. So it's all too woolly there. And then our old friend MV2. Now MV2 is pulling up some of the lower stuff and compressing the top, so it's giving us a much more even sounding signal. You can hear it without and with. Makes that initial hit really great. A lot of spank. No processing. No EQ, bring the EQ in. Great. So now, so again, that's starting to sound like a rock snare. Next up is our room print. That's a little woolly. I could have done a bit more work to that, to be honest. So that's the room mics of the live snare all combined together. It is going through a room on the console, so you're going to have the console EQ and compression going on 7 and 8. But in retrospect, I would probably just, for quick demonstration purposes, is go in around about, let's say 450. Let's have a listen. That already sounds better to me. So you could do a little bit of that. It's nice to always just go back and redo it. So pulling out a little bit of that kind of woolliness, that kind of like cardboard boxiness on drums, which is usually in that low mids. Okay, great. Now we've got our addictive drum samples. This is where we get super aggressive. We've got 3536. We've got our Pearl rock snare. Got the time adjuster on it again. See what I did here with this SPL? I increased the natural attack and the sustain. Without, it's good, but kind of did both. And then Mac DSP, bottom and top drive. Just because it's already aggressive and mid-rangey, so I'm giving it some some AC/DC. You know, that AC/DC had that low tubby snare and the top all at once. Like I said, I'm thinking my modern rock version is a little classic rock. So, you know, it's a different thing. So you're seeing the build-up of all the different sounds here. Take out that new one. It's great. It really adds something to it. Now, that is going into the same snare verb as 5 and 6. And also 7980 is an overall reverb, which we'll check out in a second. Okay, next up is a Tama rock snare. Really aggressive. Same reverb. Same time adjuster. Even more exaggerated bottom and top. Get rid of it. Too nasally, nosy. Now, great. All right. Here is an interesting one. Have a listen to this. Super low. Feeding the reverbs. SPL here. Adding some attack and sustain. An L1. Take the L1 off. What the L1's doing is it's crushing that initial transient and allowing the bottom snares and stuff to come through. It's super quiet. This is not a loud sample. Very one-dimensional. It's just the attack. Now you hear that boof, boof, a little bit of that. And again, exaggerated top and bottom. So more of a classic rock snare. It's remarkable still how dominant the live snare is though, even with all that. It's just, that ring is pretty insane. Now, it happens a lot. I get a lot of ring on the snare, but it gets soaked up by the track so easily. Now, some people like it and some people hate it, but I personally like it. So that is an uneq'd, uncompressed stereo channel, which has all of my reverbs, my kick and snare. So that's where the reverbs are coming from, and all of the samples. So they're all coming down 35, 36. And you can hear they're pretty, you know, you add that to the drum sound, you've got a pretty massive drum sound. Okay, so that is all of the snare. You've got the samples coming out 35, 36, the live snare coming out of 2, the kick live coming out of 1. Okay, now we had an issue with this console, and I've talked about this in other videos while recording a hybrid. We had an issue where the bussing didn't sound clean enough. So instead of bussing our toms together and summing them together, we printed the top and the bottom separately. So here's the top tom. Here's the bottom tom. A little woolly together. Still sound pretty good. We did a real combination of toms. And each of these toms have the same trick. There's a little bit of a time adjuster to get the phase correct between the top and the bottom. So as you can see, they're ever so slightly out. So we time adjusted them so they're in. So the top and the bottom are time adjusted. This is 58 samples. It's the same on all of them, but they're being bussed. And they're being bussed to the floor tom is going far left. Then there is a first rack on the right-hand side of the drummer, which is panning 50% to the right. And then there is another tom, which is the rack tom, which is being panned all the way to 4. And the reason why I did this super wide toms is because it's rock, and it wants to feel like it's going around the kit. So, you know, not every drummer or not everybody's going to agree with this, but, you know, it depends on the song and the band, and it felt really apt to have the toms feel like they were. Now in this instance he's doing pair and pair. He's doing rack 1, rack 2, floor toms. He's going blah, 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 you know. So you're not going to hear as much movement because there's always the center second. But of course, if it was 1, 2, 3, it'd be like down, down, boom. But he's doing gla, 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 like this. But I do like the idea of one being far left, one being far right, and one pretty much down the middle. It's not all the way down the middle, it's actually down to 50%. But I like the idea of it when you're using more than 2 toms. When I'm only using 2, I'll go like 60 and 20, so that the rack feels like it's slightly towards the hi-hat and the floor feels like it's slightly towards the full opposite side. But I don't go as wide with just the 2 rack and floor because I think there's enough width like this. But when you got 3 toms, if I was to just put one in the middle between that, it would kind of go blah, blah, blah. It wouldn't move as much. So I exaggerate the outside toms. That's just me personally. Honestly, you can do what feels good to you. Okay, so the overall tom master has no EQ or compression on it. It's just 3 and 4 master going into the console. The tom verb is a reverb with the top end cut. It's pretty big. It's 1.8 seconds. And then I took out some of the kind of lows at 139, 140 basically. That was just kind of a build up with the toms as they're going around the kit. Again, that was probably added during a mix stage where I was just trying to figure out why the toms just sounded too woolly in the track. And you can, with your verbs, shape the EQ quite dramatically to really make it effective. Each individual tom actually is bussed and has some aggressive stuff going on. The reason why we're bussing is because we had to print the top and bottom separately. So first of all, some time adjuster, knocking it back in phase with the overheads. So I'm measuring the time back in phase with the overheads. There's an old favorite of mine, the Mac DSP compressor. So you can hear. We're getting 2 or 3 dBs worth of gain reduction there. We can take it out. It's not a huge amount, not doing a great deal. I'm actually pushing it up another 2.5 dB afterwards. There is a lot of EQ going on here though, shaping it, especially on this first rack. Pulling out that ugly 350, boosting a lot of top end for articulation, and then using an L1. I'll take it off for a second. Put it back on. So it's rolling that transient back in, still keeping it aggressive, but giving me a lot more level. But then last and no means least, I've got an R bass going on here. Without, with. So that R bass is, you'll see me do this a lot. I like to control the lows going into the low end boost. And the reason why I do that is if I haven't already shaped it going in and there's tons and tons of low artifacts, air conditioning, not that we have air conditioning issues here, but in the studio, but if there was air conditioning issues, if there was other drums reverberating, rolling around down there, bass bleed, whatever it might be, if I don't control that going in, I'm just asking for all kinds of trouble because that's boosting at a point of 80, but it's not only boosting 80, it's pulling up everything around it. It's quite a nice bell on it. So I like to control it tight going in. I high passed right up until 78. So quite tight to that, and then it's boosting around about it. It allows a lot of like 40 and 60 to come through, but in a very controlled way. Otherwise, you're going to find that you're going to be putting that on early, then EQing and EQing. You would have to double EQ going out of it. I like to control the EQ going in. That's just an old superstitious thing. And it works. I have reverb, obviously from 45, 46. What I'm doing is I'm printing 45 only, 45, 46 on the center one, and 46 only on the outside tom. That's just my way of making sure it's only going to the right area of the reverb so it has a great stereo image. So left, middle, right. Hopefully that makes perfect sense to you, but it works for me. This bus one, I don't need. It was for sidechaining or action that we're not doing anymore. So, and 79 and 80, just so we can reiterate what that is that's my fake room. Now my fake room is just what I like to feed. I have a room mic where I select like the kick and the snare and the toms and just send a bit to that. It's down here. It's just an R verb. I can take it off. And you can see all the lows are taken out of it, so we don't get any like low phasing issues. And then there's an MV2. And that comes out at 35 and 36. That comes out where I take samples, where I take reverbs, etc. I like having that fake room because it's a nice controlled room beyond the rooms that I printed. I love the studio. It's a great studio. If you're an Academy member, you'll know I talk about the Robert John and the Wreck one that I just did recently. And I love the drum sounds we got, but they are a little too contained. They don't have a huge amount of room and ambience because the room is so balanced and so accurate and so well designed that it doesn't quite have that kind of like wrongness that a studio like Sunset Sound has, which I love. You know, sometimes that wrongness is right, you know? Okay, so that's all of the toms. They all share that same approach. The second tom, same amount of EQ, same compression, same limiting, same bass boost. So they're all getting the same stuff. And the reason why it's called tom trick is because what I do is I gain down between all the hits on the toms. So if you see me gain it up, look, there is still actual bleed in there, but I've gained it down. Now you can do that with clip gain. You can do it like I do traditionally by actually gaining down the hits and then putting crossfades in there, but I like to do that. My friend David Glenn, who runs ProMix with me, what he does is he actually, not only does he gain down, but he takes the end of the tom hit and then puts a low pass filter on it at like 1K on the end of the tom hit and then crossfades into it. Because often drummers will go da do 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 psh. So do psh. So this, you hear like a little bit of attack of the tom and then a cymbal bleed all over the end of the tom. So what he does is he takes after the initial transient, he then takes the top end and gets rid of it out of the tom and then puts a crossfade across it so it decays into the cymbal. I do that with the end of the song on like guitars, because guitars in particular can have such bad buzzes. They can go crang, and as the harmonics decay, you just get the fundamental and you get that, you get this bzzz build up. It's a nice trick. I talk about it in other videos a lot. Don't be afraid, because quite often when mixing, especially when mixing live stuff, but you know, live real instruments, a lot of your mix is done in your edit. So you can edit that stuff in your toms. I talk about it a lot in all of my other videos, but you know, the prepping, the putting in the drum samples, the editing the tom hits so that if there's any, you know, decay of cymbals in them, you do that trick. You bring down the tom ring between the hits. It's still there. I haven't got rid of it entirely, but if you listen to all of the toms, if I play them all together, have a listen. Still there. There's still bleed, but it's reduced. There's a lot of cymbal bleed, for instance, but now the reason why I leave that in there is I don't want it to sound too chopped. So these toms are like blowing up insane. Just smashing into the console here, red lights. Pretty aggressive. Soloed, not the prettiest things ever, but sound great in the track. So they're pretty, he's banging them hard, they're hitting the console hard. You know, I've got some boost here at about 150, 100, 150. I've got a lot of cut going in, about 350. Take it out. Take it out, it's boxy, in, beefy. A lot of about 6K boost, a lot of 4K boost from the top. But then I'm really coming up on my shelf here up to about 60 or 70. So they're out of the way of the kick. So even though I'm boosting a lot of lows, I'm kitting it nice and tight. So I'm boosting those lows and I'm coming up right underneath it. Compression is pre-EQ, not post. And the compression's about 3 to 1, but with a slowish release time. So it just kind of like holds onto them quite aggressively. Now, the inserts on these are running into the Transient Designer. The Transient Designer is really shaping. You see the sustain of the toms and the attack? I mean, look how much it really is doing. I mean, it's really adding to that fullness. It's a great hardware device. Obviously, you can use the SPL Transient Designer plugins. They're fantastic. So there's a lot of attack and a lot of sustain going on at the same time in the toms, just to make them feel really full. Now you can shorten that. If I got super fast tom stuff, quite often I'll go in there and shorten them quite dramatically. Okay, so 5 and 6 is all of my cymbals, and that means ride cymbal, overheads, and hi-hats. The ride cymbal's got a lot of other cymbal bleed in it, so it actually has a little bit of time adjuster on it to get it in phase. See? It isn't quite there with the other overheads. So I just time adjust it back a little bit. Again, you could use auto align, you could pull it back, you could find a place that feels good. But there's a lot of bleed from it. So some people chop out just the ride cymbal and just only have it play in a ride section. If that's what you want to do, you can. I don't personally like to do that, but you can do that. The overheads have time adjuster on it because, believe it or not, they weren't perfectly in phase. So what happened is probably something got knocked on the track. So it's not the end of the world, but you can see there's a 12 sample discrepancy in certain points of it. So, you know, it's just knocking it back just a little bit. And again, it's probably tiny and wouldn't bother some people, but it bothered me. You know, let's go to the transient here. You know, it's, it's like 6, 12 there, depending on how you read that. So, you know, it's very subtle, but it just seemed to sound fuller. Maybe it's a subtle amount that you wouldn't notice that much, but off. Not making a huge amount of difference. It's probably me being very, very anal. Next up is some EQ, and I'm just rolling out the super lows. Again, it's that issue I was talking about, like I don't need a lot of low end going on down there. I've got kicks going so much that with the EQ off, it's a lot more low rumble I don't want. You know, there's a lot of people talking about like, don't high pass. You know what? I was talking to Pete Lyman about this yesterday, who's one of the most, he's a big mastering engineer, runs Infrasonic and stuff. And he's like, I high pass all the time. So, don't fall into that trap of not doing high pass because you heard somebody, who actually hasn't mixed anything you've ever heard of telling you shouldn't. Everybody high passes. It's just knowing when to do it. Do it when it's applicable and it is a very useful attribute. Remember, we listen with our ears. We don't look. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. What does it sound like? Okay, so there's the same thing. Those of you who follow me on the other channel and just know my work, I use a 57 and a condenser taped together on a hi-hat. And on here, here's just the 57. Here's just the condenser. Together, they're pretty natural sounding. Now, on the auxiliary that they're being panned through, and the reason why they're going through on auxiliary is, again, the busing on the console wasn't that clean. So instead of I normally would bus those two, like I would bus the toms top and bottom, I bus those two going, you know, they weren't being bussed, they were coming out independently, direct outs from the channel, because those are on the SSLs. So the SSL has the toms and has the hi-hats being printed on it. And they're going through an auxiliary. As you can see, the high pass again on the hi-hat. Feel that ugliness? There's a hi-hat. Hi-hat nice and clean. Clean hi-hat. Ugly, low rumble, don't want it. Clean hi-hat. Doesn't affect the hi-hat signal. The hi-hat still sounds clean, doesn't sound clipped, doesn't sound like it's affected it. But it just takes out that low rumble of all the toms going, or the kick going, and low. I've already got enough definition between the live kick and any kick samples I've needed. I don't need any more low rumble, so I'm high passing. It's okay to high pass. Okay, and then there's an overhead master 5 or 6 which goes into the console. All right, on our overheads, we're coming up quite aggressively up to 120 here. So we really are, you know, we are really high passing quite aggressively up to 120. Nothing on the top, then the overheads breathe. I'm boosting at about 9 or 10K, about 3 dB. I'm also boosting at just under 3 dB at about 5 or 6K. So I'm just getting this nice shelf coming up. I'm cutting at like 350. You know, I like removing those from drums. And I'm not doing anything on the bottom end. Here's EQ out. Dark. EQ in, a lot brighter. As far as compression, we're doing, you know, we're getting like 2 to 3 dB maximum compression. Ratio set 3 to 1. The way that I have it set is I am bussing here from 23 to 24. And those are going to this stereo compressor here, which is a DBX 162. It's a stereo 160. And that's pretty aggressively compressing. And that's coming back on a DBX parallel here. So I can float this. See how much it's doing? It's adding a lot of splosh and energy. So that's floated. And that's back in. No compression or anything going on. That's just the sound. So all that compression is from the compressor itself. There's no other additional compression or EQ going on in here. It really adds a lot of energy to the track. Next up, we have our rooms on 7 and 8. So our first set of rooms is RCA. I've got super low rumble taking off 40, just high passing at 40, so there's no real low rumble. But the other thing I've got going on is this. Listen to my lo-fi plugin. Take it off. So the lo-fi is ever so slightly distorting the signal. And why is it doing that? Well, the first thing it's doing is it's trashing out the top end. It's just distorting the top end first. And the great thing that does is just fold my cymbals into it lightly. So it's very subtle, but it's awesome. Off, on, subtle. And these are the AEA mics. Here's another pair of AEA mics. Exactly the same trick. Low rumble. Okay, so same trick. Subtle, but it's making a difference. Bit of distortion without. So it works. It's great. It's really, really cool. Okay. KM184s. These were behind the drum kits pointed at the wall. Guess what? Same thing. Lo-fi distortion on it. So you can see it's just doing that little tiny thing. Okay, so now I did 2 mics outside of the main studio in the hallway. One was in an actual second booth with the door cracked, and one was in the corridor between the main live room and the other booth. So Loads of low rumble got rid of. Next up, same thing. So I got rid of an absolutely huge amount of low rumble. We have our room master down here, which we talked about on 7 and 8, which is basically the kick and the snare and the toms feeding it. And then the SPX 90 was printed live. Yeah, so the SPX 90, which was printed live off the drums. The other SPX 90 was actually part of the sample. So it's really super clean. But here you can see tons of bleed. But it's nice. Got rid of the ring, top end boost, more ring removed, and the MV2 to even out. So that same annoying ring that we had in the snare, taking it out of the reverb. Here you go. Pretty tasty what it's doing. So yeah, the SPX 90 is a pretty good trick. And the reason why I was printing it live with the guys, with the drummer, was it gave him a sense of excitement. And then when I came to mix, I was like, oh, I like that SPX 90 room tone. So, quite often if you're in a studio that has external reverbs, especially old classic ones, and I know they're cheap, the SPX 90s, but Andy Wallace still uses them, people love them. Obviously PCM 42s, 70s, 80s, 81s, all of these different lexicons you can use, and they are fantastic, really, really cool toys to have when you're mixing. So if you can, print them when you're in the studio, and then when you come back to mix, you'll have them. Now our rooms are quite special here. Let's take out the EQ. Put the EQ in, the compression in. So what have I got going on? I've got some low boost at about just under 100, but I'm also coming up to where the kick is at about 60 and cutting. So I'm not trying to get it out of the way of the kick. I like the thump in there, but I've already shaped it quite heavily in Pro Tools. So I'm just cleaning up the cleaning up. Letting the top breathe, not doing any cut there. Do a little boost at about 9 or 10. Nothing on the high mids, and just a little cut at about 400. EQ out, EQ in, compression out, compression in. And we're doing the normal release time, not too fast, not too slow. And our compression ratio is quite aggressive though. It's at about 7 to 1. And they are linked together. And this is the same with the overhead. So what happens is this first channel of the left of the two controls the compression on the right side as well. So it's true stereo compression. It's not two mono compressors running, one is controlling the other. So here's all of our drum sound without any samples in it. You can see it's not quite that aggressive yet, but there's some fun things that we do. So on 29 and 30, you'll see extending out on the kick, on the snare, and on the rooms. Now these go here into our crush drums here. So without them in, with them in. Not a huge amount of stuff it's doing, but it's just adding that extra compression and EQ. And it just gives me a little bit more energy underneath if I want to push it up. So it's parallel drum compression. So what I've got is I've got some boost, believe it or not, at about 300 for some low thickness. I cut a lot of it out and I'm just dialing a little bit back in. A little boost at about just under 1K. And then some boost at 10K. And then I'm coming up to about 60. And as far as compression, it's post EQ, but it's on limit. It's right up here, so maximum compression. And it just adds some energy. Here's without. Here's with. Just a little bit. Sometimes I'll go nuts on it and sometimes I won't. Okay. Now the kick in is controlling a sub as well. If I float it, see the meters over there? That's just reading the sub only. The sub is a DBX 120. A, it's a subharmonic synthesizer. What it's doing is it's giving me pretty low lows. I mean, I'm probably set to about 40 here, just under 40, just under 30. It's like 30 and 40, just a little bit of sub. And that just gives me some weight, you know, just some weight to my low lows on my kick. I love it. It's really nice. It's not super loud, but it's there just to give me some weight. Now, as you can see, I'm boosting 60 hertz and I'm cutting some 350. I'm also compressing quite heavily, about 6 dB, so it's continually there. So we add our sub in with our live kick. Let's unfloat our live kick. Take a sub out. No sub. Back in. Really gives it some serious weight. Throw in our outside kicks. Put in our snare. Add in all our samples. Now it's going to get nuts. With our verbs, toms, overheads, and rooms. Crush drums. And there's our drum sound. It's pretty spanky, aggressive, sounds like an SSL. Okay, so that's all of our drum stuff.